presenters. We had a range of very interesting presentations. The logic of the whole workshop was that we started from a regional level perspective, what can be done at the local regional level, and then moved on towards the national and European perspective and discussed the same subject. And we had very valuable contributions from Kujawsko-Pomorski region, from Richard and Elisa, and Veronika Resch from the Austrian MA, from the national perspective, Jolanta Vajchunia from the Lithuanian MA, and Martin Dembroin from DG Regio. And these were all very different perspectives, but very interesting contributions, and I will come back to them during this short summary. And I also, the panelists made a very valuable contribution, and I think those are again examples of countries where there is a lot of experimentation is going on with regard to the future territorial approaches. So I would like to thank also the presentations from Cornwall, Czech Republic, from RED and DG Mare and DG Agri, the contributions during the session, and this kind of framed also our discussions. So moving on, so basically what we try to achieve with this workshop is to get a better understanding about the territorial approaches, the different territorial approaches, but of course, as it was rightly highlighted during this discussion, we cannot cover all of them. It was mainly focused on CLLD and ITI, the two main instruments, tools in this regard, and of course the coordination of funds, which is a key issue in relation to that. And we try to identify some of the key barriers standing in the way and hopefully possible tools and mechanisms that can be used to overcome these in the coming programming period. So these were vaguely the objectives of our workshop. So what was discussed, firstly, the coordination of the territorial approaches. And here I think during the discussion it became clear that there is a slight, not even slight distinction between the coordination of the different territorial approaches and the coordination of funds, which are two separate issues. So coming to the coordination of the territorial approaches, it's widely agreed that integrated approaches are important, as well as rural-urban linkages, such as the event of yesterday showed, and there are discussions on that. And the basic ingredients are set out by the European regulations, so it's there. And both ITI and CLLD, as it has been decided, can be supported by multiple funds. At the same time, CLLD and ITI have very different scope and focus. And in a way, ITI focuses on the larger territorial areas and metropolitan scale, and the CLLD more on local community-led development. So in that sense, there is a clear distinction between the focus of the two. At the same time, what came out from the discussion is that there is also need for some kind of guidance at which level, which territorial level, and for which topic scope the two approaches should be applied. But this kind of distinction, this wider scope of ITI and the local scope of CLLD were shown also by examples from Poland, where they use, from the Polish region, where they use ITI at more regional level and the local level CLLD, and in other countries as well there is a similar approach that, for instance, the Czech Republic, where ITI is more regional level and the likes focus on the CLLD level. So then about the coordination of funds, which was a big discussion, and it's been agreed that this is really and has been the main challenge with regard to the future territorial approaches. So how funds are coordinated essentially within the different territorial approaches without neglecting the fact that it's important to coordinate those approaches with each other. And one argument was that we need to make sure that the complexity of this task is not getting in the way of what we want to do and what we know is right, which is this integrated multi-sectoral approach. But at the same time, it's clear that there are a lot of uncertainties about the concrete interpretation of EU regulations and rules in this sense and how it can be really implemented on the ground. And, but the positive message, and I think maybe that should have been the final message, but it's not yet, it's that few will experiment with this multi-funding approach, and that's why we brought some very interesting presenters, and presentations were very relevant in this regard. And here the emphasis is not on few, but rather that there will be experimentation in the coming period. And as one of the panelists said, it's a good news that it's actually happening. So these are just examples of where it's happening, and I think there is a lot to be still developed. We learned that. There is no results at this stage. But for instance, in Poland, we heard a very interesting example from Kujawsko-Pomorski region, where the decision was taken that it will be most likely multi-funded programs there. Of course, there are still discussions ongoing how to coordinate the regional operational program with the rural development program priorities from the national level. Then in Lithuania, where it will be slightly more limited still to funds, as they call it, mermaid legs, which I think will become soon EU jargon, but it's really EFRD and EMFF which are combined there, but it's still a lot of interesting and useful experience can be drawn from there. Of course, it's an easier way of coordination because of the same MA and PA for the two programs. We heard very interesting aspects from Cornwall, where again they go for multi-funded approach. They aim to go for that, depending of course on the national decision and scheme and structure framework. So again, this involves a lot of coordinations, 3 MAs, 3 PAs working together on that, as well as the Czech Republic, which is one of the pioneers in probably in the future multi-funded territorial approaches. So these are just examples where it's happening, and I think I suggest you look also later on detailed presentations because it's very interesting. So the coordination of funds, some ideas which came up, but as I said, we couldn't. It was not to solve the whole situation. So it's important to have integrated strategies as far as it's possible. Need to harmonize the priorities of different programs at different levels. Sometimes it involves all funds. Sometimes it's more simplified if it's, for instance, leg-flag strategies which need to be harmonized. One option would be to include a CLLD part in each of the programs, an axis on that to ensure that it's there. Of course, cooperation and communication between the key stakeholders is very important. So getting together key associations, partners to discuss it, coordinated calls and selection of flags, LDS and projects to ensure that it fits within the overall framework, as well as informal cooperation was mentioned. So that, for instance, the rural networks have a key role in that. Overall, it was stressed that it's very important not to create additional burden with the multiple funding system for lands. And I think this is the last slide I would like to finish with. Although the focus was on the coordination of the funds, but through many presentations, what came out, and it's very important, that LEADER has been there and CLLD has been there for long. And there is a lot of lessons learned through that, and we have to build on that experience. And we heard very interesting examples from the national level, from both Austria and Lithuania, how we can learn from the current experience, how we can ensure that it's simplified in many ways, that it's more efficient, which is often an audit requirement, and it was highlighted by the audit. So it concerns areas such as leg selection, monitoring and defining the right indicators, the simplification possibilities through lump sum, and leader coordination committee to discuss and exchange with stakeholders. So a lot of learning has taken place, and it's important to remind us what leader is really about, and it's been agreed that it's important, and that's the basis of the future experience as well. It's building trust, especially in new member states. It has been a very important point. It changed people's mind in many places. It has to be bottom-up, multi-sectoral. Employment creation is important to show, but not the only objective, of course. And integrating farmers in the whole process. These are ideas that came out.